let's stick with the Victorian election, and it could all be about young university students. If the Greens are going to outperform compared to previous elections, how will their performance stack up against the teals as well? Joining us now to share and explain some of the big trends in this election is William Wright, Head of Insights with GovConnex, a data and insights company that is helping Sky News in delivery of, in particular, our election night coverage. William, thanks again for your time. So I guess, first of all, that big question around the Greens, how they'll perform at this election, the sort of voters they're after, and why we're talking more Greens than teals, at least at this stage.
Yeah, it's nice to be back, Tom. Well, it's the same story again this election. Basically, the trends that we saw out of the federal election is that the Greens are going to do particularly well. If we look at the polling we saw the news poll on Monday, we saw Freshwater Strategy had a poll out in the AFR on Monday as well. That's showing a 14% primary vote for the Greens, which is a 3% uptick since the 2018 election. The Greens currently have 3 seats in the Victorian lower house, so they have Brunswick, Prahran and Melbourne, but they're targeting a further 3 at the moment. So Northcote, Albert Park and Richmond. Richmond's probably the best chance at this time. Interesting you speak about university students. This is a trend we're seeing all across Western democracies. We're seeing, obviously, Australians are becoming more university educated, but university voters seem to be trending away from centre-right and right parties towards left-leaning parties, and in Australia's case, more so towards the Greens and the Teals to a lesser extent. So we're actually seeing the Greens currently, 3 of the 5 seats that they hold are in the top 5 in terms of voters of in terms of the Victorian electorate with a university degree, and should they take the 3 that they're targeting, they'd have 6 of the top 8 by university education.
It's really interesting because it creates a problem for the Conservative or the right-hand side of the electoral pendulum, if you like. Our overall number of university bachelor above qualified Australians went from 22 to 26 in the last census, and as you say, young people, they're more like 44%. So if that's the trend, how do they arrest it? So it's an interesting question to ask in this election and also going forward. You mentioned Richmond. You say it's easily the best shot for the Greens to increase their lower house representation. How come?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting contest because you might think Northcote, and again, I do think they're a very good chance in Northcote because it's a 0.5% margin. Richmond's a 5.8% margin, but you have a retiring MP there, Senior Andrews Government Minister Richard Wynne. He's been there since 1999. He's been fighting off Greens contests basically since 1999. He's held them off. You've got Lauren O'Dwyer coming in trying to save it for the Greens, but you've got Gabrielle De Vietri. She is the Mayor of Yarra City Council. She's a very good chance of winning the seat, and the Greens internally are very confident of their chances.
Always helps when you've had a representation, doesn't it? Locally in a council sort of contest, and then you can transfer that. So, all right, all eyes are on Richmond and those other 2 you mentioned as well. All right, this is the bit we like getting to as well. Some of the trends in particular, and cost of living mentions is what we've been talking about previously. What trend, let's give us the first trend word you've been picking up out there at the moment in terms of what politicians are talking about.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one and perhaps quite a surprising one as well. So we spoke last week about how cost of living is the key issue. We saw in the midterms on Wednesday, all the exit polls showed in the US that was the key issue there. The polling, again, this Freshwater poll during the week had cost of living as the key issue for Victorians in this election. Once again, we're seeing that the politicians are speaking about it. But this week, it's an unusual one. So you've got 44 mentions, but predominantly these are actually coming from the Labor Party now. So 51%, which is on its head to what it was the last 2 weeks. The Coalition had been talking about it a lot, which goes to show that Labor clearly knows that they need to defend these key seats to the Greens, but also they're just narrowing down their message. So this might surprise a few people, but Labor wants to show that they're serious in getting cost of living down for Victorians.
We had those 3 charts, as we saw there. Labor's mentioned it's slowly going up, and overall mentions increasing last week as well. But yeah, you'd think that the Coalition, as the Labor increases, they'd be doing it too, you'd think, but so far maybe not. And finally, IBAC. Now, this is one-sided, but it'd probably be even more one-sided if it weren't for Adam Somyurek, of course. Take us through these numbers.
Yeah, so IBAC, there's been a bit of press. You were speaking about it just then this week, and the opposition has been latching onto that a lot as well. Over this course of government, we've had, I think it's 49% of mentions by Coalition MPs with regards to IBAC. Adam Somyurek, obviously he's not a fan of the Premier, 130 mentions, and the Shadow Treasurer, David Davis, with 117 mentions. Yeah, so it's really interesting, and we've been seeing a big uptick in mentions of IBAC, so clearly the Coalition wants to focus a bit more on that.
Yeah, so independence could be the key one, because it's not just the Coalition talking about that, but no doubt they'll want to. William Wright, thank you. We'll talk again next week. We're getting closer, a couple of weeks away. We'll keep looking at those trends, what they're actually talking about in those tallies, and that always tells you where they think the votes will be going. Thank you.